Max, light of my life, fire of my loins, my sin, my soul, M-A-X. The tip of the tongue, taking a trip of 3 steps, down the palate to tap at 3 on the teeth. M-A-X. He was M, plain M in the morning, standing 5 feet 11 in one sock. He was Mad Max in fireproofs. He was the Flying Dutchman on the track. He was Max Verstappen on the dotted line. But in my arms, he was always Max. Did he have a precursor? He did. Indeed he did. In point of fact, there might have been no Max at all had I not loved, one summer, a certain initial boy child in a princedom by the sea. Oh, when? About as many years before Max was born as my age was that summer. You can always count on a murderer for a fancy prose style. People of the jury, exhibit number 1 is what the seraphs, the misinformed, simple, noble-winged seraphs envied. Look at this tangle of thorns. Hey guys, it's Flowergothic, and well, it's finally here. Months after I first revealed I was working on it, it's finally here. My breakdown of Kelly, Piquet, Max Verstappen, and their families is finally here. Dutch Tallahassee has come to life. This couple has intrigued me to no end since June of 2024, and it's not for a good reason. There's something about their relationship dynamics that's just off. And it's not because of the obvious 9-year age gap. I cannot stress that enough. I've been over the creepy circumstances surrounding their first meeting. I've discussed the weird dynamics surrounding their relationship on social media. Hell, I've even talked about the controversies surrounding both of their families. Seriously, if the age gap was the only issue here, I would not have made the timeline. I would not have considered making this video at all. End of story. Even though I've spent the past while working on a timeline detailing their toxic relationship, I still have more to say. Why? Well, first off, I know many of you don't have the patience to read through a multi-page Google Doc that spans at least 3 decades. Let's be honest here. Second, the plan was always to make a big video detailing Max and Kelly, especially Kelly. That first video where I unveiled the timeline, that was just a preview! And third, there's just so much more to dive into. The drama, the rumors, the shady connections, the bizarre coincidences. Trust me, things will get weird. We have several questions to answer. How exactly did Max and Kelly meet? What makes their families so problematic? Why do I think the relationship is toxic? And what about Kelly makes me want to peel my skin off with my Tree Hut Coca Colada She Sugar Scrub every time I look at her? That's what we're here to find out. But first, of course, a lot of you are new here, so let me explain what this is. In every video, I have a section where I give disclaimers about the content and rules for you to follow. This is partly to emphasize my creatorial intent, but it's also somewhat for legal reasons. Let's start with the disclaimers. Today, we're going to be diving headfirst into some drama with a capital D. But I must stress that I have some rules that I follow when discussing controversial people. First, I do not speculate about minors. Kelly has a daughter who's grade school aged. I've taken measures to make sure she's only mentioned when necessary. I will also not address her by name or show her face. Both are an open secret, I know, but I don't want to bring a literal child into the crossfire of this relationship. I also don't want to contribute to the exploitation of her that her mother seems to encourage. Seriously, why does this child have Instagram fan pages? Thus, she will only be referred to as Kelly's daughter or the child. And she will not be talked about unless she's relevant to whatever point I'm making. Second, I try to be mindful when discussing someone's physical appearance. I know I've made mistakes in this category when I was younger and dumber, but I'm learning every day and I am working to be better. What does this mean? It means we're not going to snark about Kelly's appearance, Max's appearance, etc. It also means we're not going to speculate on whether Kelly has had plastic surgery. I've seen the comparisons on social media, but I'm not going to contribute. The faces they make and the outfits they wear though, those will be fair game. And third, aside from the child, we will not be using any nicknames. We won't be calling Kelly Granny or Mother Gothel or any of the other terms y'all have made up for her. We're not going to call her family the cult either. This isn't middle school, let's be adults here. Another disclaimer comes in spelling. I am a red-blooded American. I speak and write in American English. F1 coverage, especially surrounding Max, mostly comes from European sources. Those primarily use British English. To keep things consistent, I will be using American spelling for almost everything. The exception will be quotes from sources that use British English. For those, I will use the British spelling. I have one more disclaimer, and it has to do with teams. Many F1 teams have changed their names over the years. Some of the teams I mentioned today don't even exist anymore. For simplicity, I will only be referring to each team under the name they are currently using. For teams that no longer exist, I will refer to them using the most common name they were known as when they existed. Okay, moving on. Now, here are the rules I want you to follow. Number 1. This is, by all accounts, a piece where we talk a lot about speculation. It's also an opinion piece, but less so than what I usually make. You might interpret things differently, and that's okay. Number 2, however, comments harassing me or others will be reported. Please, for the love of God, behave yourselves. Number 3, sadly, I can't confirm nor deny most of everything we'll be discussing here. Please put a big, old-fashioned allegedly in front of what I say unless it's otherwise verified. Number 4, as always, even though we're discussing problematic people here, do not harass or dogpile on anyone I mention in this video. Even if you think they deserve it, just don't. And 5, much like Danish Tallahassee all those years ago, this video could be triggering for people in toxic or abusive relationships. In fact, I'd argue Dutch Tallahassee gets more triggering. You're free to leave at any time if you get uncomfortable. I'll put a special content warning before we get into the really bad stuff, I promise. And now, let us begin. Kelly Tamsma Piquet Sotomayor was born on December the 7th, 1988 in Homburg, Germany. She's the second child and first daughter of Brazilian 3-time Formula One world champion Nelson Piquet Sr. and Dutch woman Sylvia Tamsma. We'll be calling her father Nelson Sr. here on out. She has one older brother, Nelson Piquet Jr., whom we'll call Nelson Jr. She also has a younger sister named Julia. God fucking damn it! I couldn't find much on her aside from one post on Instagram where she endorses Bolsonaro, so I don't have anything to say about her. She also has 4 half-brothers, 2 older and 2 younger. One of the older ones happened to be born just months before her while her parents were separated. Make of that what you will. She grew up in Monaco in the south of France. Sylvia and Nelson Sr. divorced in 1993, and Kelly was mostly raised by her mother as far as I could tell. And before you ask, I really don't know what it is Sylvia did or does for a living. Google only labels her as Nelson Sr.'s ex-wife. Most of her Instagram posts are boomer memes, animals, and enough of her children to clearly indicate which one is the favorite. Some sources say she did modeling in her younger years, but at least to me, unless you reach Twiggy or Gisele Bündchen levels of fame, that means nothing. Not much is known about Kelly's childhood. She spent a couple of years in the 2000s living with her dad in Brazil, but was back in southern France by the time she was 14. In 2002, she might have been romantically linked to Brazilian race car driver Tuga Roca. Roca would tragically die in 2019 in a plane crash, and Kelly would memorialize him in an Instagram post. And it got weird. Just take a listen.
Today I said goodbye to you. But my heart is still broken that you left us. You were part of my life like few others have been. Almost 20 years of friendship, my first crush, a person dear to my entire family and everyone who knew you. And I will never forget when we met for the first time, and the affection you had for me from the very first minute. You made me feel like the most special girl in the world and awakened very special feelings.
So, wait. He was your first love, and you two met when you were 11 and he was 18. What the fuck? But Flower, you say. She could have meant he was her childhood crush. He could have been innocent. First off, she straight up said Tuga made her feel, quote, like the most special girl in the world. This definitely wasn't some love she felt from afar. It sounds like it could have been something he knew about, or worse, reciprocated. This is especially because later in that same obituary, Kelly indeed refers to him as her love.
This photo was taken in 2002 in France, when you and your family came to visit my house, and I still remember my excitement and emotion. I managed to bring together in one photo my two loves, you and Tusti, and this photo became one of the most special ones I have to this day.
And before anyone jumps in with, well, she's just looking back with nostalgia, it doesn't mean anything, let's not forget this tribute was posted in 2019. That's long after any quote-unquote rose-colored memories should have softened into bitter, bitter truths. She's presenting something potentially problematic as if it's still meaningful, and that makes it even stranger. Nostalgia can be powerful, but we have to recognize when it starts bordering on inappropriate. So yeah, this is more than just innocent childhood memories, okay? Okay. And that's not getting into the things she lied about. In the infamous 2022 Vogue Netherlands interview, she claimed her schooling was ordinary.
I don't know if my mother did it on purpose, but I went to a regular French school with children from different economic backgrounds instead of the international schools in Monaco, where children from high-profile families attended.
But here's the thing. We have access to Kelly's LinkedIn page. That regular French school she's talking about is the International School of Nice, an elite private school complete with an IB diploma program. Kelly attended the school between 2004 and 2005. Now, the earliest tuition rate I could find for the school was in 2007. Why? The archived version of the site was so fucking buggy it wouldn't let me look at the fees for years before that. But let's do some mathematics. In 2007, the basic tuition fee for the school was 12,840 euros. Assuming this fee rose with inflation, it would have been roughly 12,032 euros in 2004. In US currency, that's around $13,074. That's fucking pricey to say the least. She would spend her junior year of high school at St. Clair's, Oxford, an elite English boarding school. The 2022 article would have you believe that was her last change in schooling before college, but you would be wrong! For unknown reasons, she would finish up her high school diploma in Brazil. Aside from her LinkedIn page, she doesn't talk about it, much like how I don't talk about... But we're not here to talk about my schooling. She went to the Marymount Manhattan College in New York City. Despite it being a private institution, it's not in any way prestigious. In fact, Its latest acceptance rate was 9% higher than the giant public university I went to. It's also not a diverse school. According to the college itself, 43% of the student body was white in 2024, and only 45 students at the school were non-US citizens. And I looked throughout the web to learn about Marymount Manhattan. You know what I saw? I got the vibe the school is for rich people who did not have the grades or test scores to get into the more prestigious institutions. Well, at least if you weren't going for their large performing arts program. American college guy Nietzsche gave it an overall score of C-. Also, it was involved in a scandal a couple of years back. It got investigated by the New York Attorney General after a massive data breach compromised the information of almost 100,000 students. It had to pay like over $1 million in settlements. Kelly did not graduate with a performing arts degree. She got a BA in International Relations. In that Vogue Netherlands interview, Kelly said she originally wanted to intern for the United Nations, but that she could not do it because she not only had to graduate, but also needed a master's degree. For the record, that's not true. In 2011, when Kelly graduated, according to her LinkedIn, you had to be in a master's program to be considered for various United Nations internships. That includes UNESCO and the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. But the United Nations also has a Young Professionals program. This program is specifically designed for people under 32 years of age with a bachelor's. A successful application could get you a 2-year contract. But for whatever reason, the UN was out. Maybe that summer in 2009 where she volunteered at an orphanage in Tanzania doing white savior work has something to do with it. Instead, Kelly bounced around between a couple of internships and nepo baby jobs. These include, but are not limited to, assistant stylist at Vogue Latin America. She held this position from February to December 2010 and got it thanks to, quote, a friend who was a few years older and in fashion. She helped with the photo shoots and organized clothing. She also claims to have contributed to the stylist's blog, but she doesn't provide any samples of her writing. Come on, Kelly, if you're gonna claim something, at least have receipts. Interned at the couture buying office for Bergdorf Goodman. She did this in the summer of 2010, where most of her responsibilities involved checking the inventory and preparing orders. Publicity intern for KCD Worldwide, held from August to December 2011. A little bit of a gap, but okay, she didn't graduate until 2011 after all. She did a lot of inventory checking for this job, but she also had some standard office duties, like collecting information for mailings and press events. She even got to manage Fashion Week guest lists. Wow! Marketing coordinator for Schutz, held from June 2012 to March 2013. Wait, another gap? Well, at least this one's just 6 months. Her duties involved managing logistics for marketing campaigns and strategic partnerships, which was so important, it was listed twice in the description on her LinkedIn page. Other than that, it was your standard PR bullshit. Columnist for the Brazilian edition of Marie Claire, held from, well, actually this one's a bit weird. You see, Kelly claims she worked for them from April to December 2014. Another gap in 11 months? What the fuck? But all 8 of her articles were published in July and August of that same year. And they aren't anything thought-provoking either. It's mostly stuff you would see on BuzzFeed, maybe even on the content forums I used to write for during the pandemic. And after yet another months-long sabbatical from work, she followed her family into formula racing, specifically as a, quote, social media and PR consultant for a new series based around electric cars. Formula E. She held the position for about a year and 9 months. That's despite the Dutch Vogue article saying she was actually there for twice as long. Why'd you lie about that, Kelly? She also did some work modeling at this time, but none of it was of any significance. I guess she could be considered a model if going to a shopping mall as a socialite counts as a modeling career. But wait a second, Flower, you say. Yes, you're showing that Kelly's a liar, but you mentioned that her family is problematic. What did her other family members do to make you say that? Well, before I introduce you to the Verstappens, let's go over. To get some context as to how weird the Piquet family is as a whole, we need to talk about the sins of the father and the son, because they both suck. Let's cut back to 1988, the year Kelly was born. It was the year after Nelson Sr.'s third and final World Championship. It was the year he switched teams and finished in 6th place. And it was the year he blasted his opponents in the press. Take his former teammate, Nigel Mansell. He scored second in that 1987 World Championship, and even had more wins than Nelson Sr. So what did Sr. do in 1988? Well, he called Mansell, quote, an uneducated blockhead with a stupid and ugly wife. Another example comes in the form of his fellow countryman, the late Ayrton Senna. Nelson Sr. straight up called the multi-time world champion, quote, the Sao Paulo taxi driver. He also kind of accused him of being a homosexual. And by kind of, I mean repeatedly, with the latest such instance I could find happening in 2020. Did you notice how I said the late Ayrton Senna? Senna tragically died in 1994 during an F1 race in San Marino, a race that essentially changed how the sport operated. Nelson Sr. continues to take pot shots at him, despite the circumstances surrounding his death.
Another day, a journalist asked me, being honest, who was the best, you or Senna? I said, I'm alive.
1988 could also have been a better year for Nelson Sr. competition-wise. Remember how I said he won his final World Championship the year before? Well, he would end up switching teams to Team Lotus and finished in 6th place. Now, who ended up being the champion that year? Ayrton Senna. Talk about being a sore loser, Jesus Christ. Nelson Sr. would retire after the 1991 season to focus on his business ventures. One of those ventures was Piquet Sports, mostly to get his son the training he needed to go into racing. He even established it in time for Nelson Jr. to turn 16, the minimum age you needed to be at the time to compete in Formula 3, one of the junior open-wheel racing championships. Think of it like the high school football or basketball team. American football, that is. It's the level before going college, F2, which is the level before going pro, F1. Nelson Jr. had a solid start in F3. He finished first in the South American F3 Championships 2002 season. He then went on to score 3rd place in the more prestigious British F3 Championship in 2003. Then he scored 1st place in the same series the next year. He then went on to Formula 2 and did a couple of years there. He finished 2nd in the Drivers' Championship in 2006. So far, everything is above board. And making sure Nelson Jr. was free of controversy was something Sr. planned. In a 2004 article with a Brazilian magazine, it was shown how Nelson Sr. planned every aspect of his son's career.
Father Piquet's explanation is enormous. On the Sunday of the victory of Nelsinho, the father followed everything by phone, calling insistently from Brasilia to England. He only relaxed after the result, celebrated with a caipirinha.
This even went down to his public image.
Nelson Sr. plans every detail of his son's career, including his image. He doesn't want his son to win the Lemon Trophy, a vindictive game awarded to the most unfriendly people in F1, and which Piquet has won more than once.
Gee, I wonder why. Nelson Sr. even had this ominous thing to say about his son's racing.
Junior is going to be a lot more complete than I am as a driver.
So let's talk about the absolute failure that was Nelson Jr.'s F1 career. After his 2006 F2 victory, Nelson Jr. was scouted by the Renault F1 team. He spent 2007 as a reserve and test driver. That means he would drive the team's car to help them gather data on any upgrades or performance issues. He would also fill in if one of the main drivers got sick or hurt. He would get promoted to a full seat in 2008. At this point, Renault was struggling after a highly successful era. It won 2 back-to-back drivers' championships with Fernando Alonso in 2005 and 2006. 2006. But Alonso jumped ship to another team in 2007. Then, for reasons that are too complicated to explain here, just Google F1 Spygate if you're curious. He returned to Renault in 2008. They had not won a single race since Alonso's second championship. And 2008 was an intense year for F1. Renault was determined to get back on top with Alonso, but there were a couple of problems. Firstly, Nelson Jr. had a rocky F1 start. He only scored 19 points in the 2008 season, with only one top 3 finish and 4 other point-scoring finishes. And second, a young driver supported by his father was making waves in F1. He was scoring win after win and had a high chance of getting the coveted Drivers' Championship. Who is he? You guessed it! Wait, this joke doesn't work because Max was still a kid at the time. It was Lewis Hamilton. Lewis Hamilton was making waves in F1. So much so that by the time of the 4th to last race, the Singapore Grand Prix, he had 4 first place finishes. Alonso, meanwhile, had 0. Renault needed to think fast to get Alonso and themselves back on top. So they made a request of Nelson Jr. They asked him to do something quite unethical in Singapore.
But Alonso was the first to pit. And Renault's gamble looked to have paid off when Piquet crashed heavily and brought out the safety car. Fernando won again for the 20th time in his career, with Rosberg second and Hamilton third.
So what was Nelson Jr. specifically asked to do? Well, Renault told him to deliberately crash his car while Alonso was in the pit lane. The advantage? The crash would bring out the safety car, which all racers would have to drive behind until the mess was cleaned up. At the time, racers were not allowed to enter the pit lane when a safety car was out. They had to wait until they were all behind the safety car. So Alonso could easily overtake the other cars, which he did. Did it make much of a difference? No, but it did give Renault that victory they so desperately craved. They even got another from Alonso in the race right after, but he ultimately finished 5th with 61 points to Hamilton's 98. Nelson Jr. finished that season in 12th with a grand total of 19 points. But that's okay. Everyone has to start somewhere. He even scored higher than future world champions Nico Rosberg and Jenson Button. Then came the 2009 season. Nelson Jr. was not great, to say the least. He had no wins. He didn't even score any points. Sure, Alonso wasn't making any top 3 finishes himself, but he still scored a decent amount of points. So, in the late summer that year, Renault let Nelson Jr. go. Replacing an underperforming driver in the middle of a season is not an uncommon practice in F1. It's happened as recently as 2024. But here's a word of advice. If you had the nepo baby of a 3-time world champion to do something unethical for you, maybe don't fire them in the middle of the year. Because Nelson Jr. blew the whistle on the planned Singapore crash. That set off one of the biggest scandals in F1 history. The FIA, the governing body for F1, launched a full-scale investigation. Renault's team principal and coach got an indefinite ban for the incident. Its engineer received a 5-year ban. Both would later be overturned, though. Renault itself was given a suspended sentence and was threatened with a ban if they pulled that shit again. Renault, of course, tried to fight it. They accused Junior and Senior of libel. They claimed it was a blackmail attempt after ditching the former. This went about as well as you think, considering that the FIA confirmed that the scandal indeed happened. Renault would sell most of its stake in the team to a Luxembourgish investment firm in 2010, the same year the Piquets won the libel case. And what about Nelson Jr.? Well, you know the saying, stitches get stitches, right? Junior's whistleblowing made him practically unemployable in F1. He wasn't punished by the FIA, in fact he was let off the hook in exchange for testimony, but some team principals said they would not hire him once the scandal emerged, including Christian Horner, the longtime racing principal for Max's team, Red Bull Racing. But this leads to several questions. Why did Nelson Jr. blow the whistle? Was it truly to bring ethics back into the sport, or was it because he got dropped from his team? Did Nelson think unveiling the scandal would boost his career? Did he think he would be seen as a hero in a sport that thrives on secrecy? What was his end goal here? Did he feel genuine guilt over his involvement and wanted to atone? Or was he pressured to reveal the truth by external forces? We do not know. Perhaps we'll never know. Even I do not know. But I will give my 2 cents. I do not believe Nelson Jr.'s motives were altruistic. I mean, he revealed the scandal just after Renault dropped him. I think it was either retaliation or an "if you take me down, I'm taking you with me" salt the earth mindset. And there's to the puzzle. As I said, the Singapore Grand Prix was the 4th to last race of the 2008 season, and it wasn't just Lewis Hamilton as a contender for the Drivers' Championship. He was joined by Brazilian driver Felipe Massa. By the time Singapore rolled around, Massa scored 5 first-place finishes to Hamilton's 4. Hamilton only had 1 more top 3 finish overall than Massa. Hell, Massa was just 1 point away from Hamilton. When the race began, Massa was in pole position. Hamilton was right behind him. Massa kept a steady lead before Nelson Jr.'s crash. But by the end, Hamilton finished 3rd and Massa finished 13th. So what the fuck happened in Singapore? 2 laps after the crash, the pit lanes reopened. Massa was the first to pit to get fuel. For reference, this was before refueling during pit stops was banned. He drove off with the fuel hose still attached to his car, dragging a mechanic with him. This incident arguably cost him a first-place finish, and thus, the championship. And well, you can probably put the pieces together. Nelson Jr. intentionally crashed. That forced Massa to wait before he could do a pit stop. The pit stop went horribly wrong. Nelson Jr. is probably the reason Massa lost his shot at the championship. And for what? To make sure only his daddy and Senna were the true and honest Brazilian F1 world champions? What the fuck? After the scandal, Nelson Jr. would race in NASCAR for a few years. He would return to Formula racing in 2014. Why? He was invited to race for a brand new series based around electric cars. Formula E. And now you know the basic controversy surrounding the Piquet family. At least before Max comes into the picture. Oh, speaking of, let's talk about... Unlike Kelly and Nelson Sr., Max and Yoss's lives are a lot more interconnected. Because of that, we're gonna briefly flash back to the start of Yoss's career before we get to Max. Like Nelson Sr., Yost is a former Formula 1 driver. He got his start in 1994 with the Benetton racing team. Coincidentally, that was the last team Sr. drove for before retiring. Even then, his driving career is more known for this.
There goes the fuel hose. A little bit of a problem. Is that fuel splashing? Horrific.
Greatest fear of everyone up and down the pit lane.
Everybody reacted very quickly. You can see the burns, superficial burns too. Jos Verstappen.
And yes, this also happened in 1994. It reignited allegations that Benetton was using a system to gain an advantage over the others. That included electronic aids, which were banned at the time. Those rumors would not be confirmed until 2016 when a former engineer spilled the beans. See, Nelson Jr., sometimes you have to wait to reveal things that have happened. Despite his 2 top 3 finishes, Yost would be dropped later that year for underperforming. He would bounce between teams for a few years, including Footwork Arrows, Tyrrell, and MTV Simtech Ford. That last one would file for bankruptcy just 3 months into Yost's season there. That in turn forced him to be a test and reserve driver for 2 other teams, including Benetton, for most of 1995. And I will stress that Yost is not a bad driver. He was a successful karter in the 80s and won many Formula 3 championships. The downfall of his career stems from bad choices and bad luck. In 1993, he had a successful test drive with the Arrows team. He would be contacted by every team on the grid at that point except for Ferrari and Williams. This was before Williams went to shit. They were a top team once upon a time, guys! He was convinced to sign for Benetton, initially as a test and reserve driver. And on paper, the logic behind it was reasonable. Getting his foot in the door with a major team instead of driving immediately for a minor team could benefit his career. As racing historian Mark Hughes put it,
the idea was that in doing a main driver's donkey work and testing, Jos would accumulate lots of mileage in 1994, helping him adapt fully to F1 before making his race debut, possibly the following year.
things did not go as planned. Firstly, while Benetton was a major team, they were not a championship-winning team, but they were about to be. They had a fast-rising driver on their roster who would not only break records, but change the sport itself. You may know him as Michael Schumacher. I'm not even kidding you, the world of motorsports is just one giant web. Second, remember what I said about reserve drivers? That they would fill in if something were to happen to the main ones? Before the season began, fellow main driver JJ Leto suffered a neck injury while testing the car. So Yost was brought in long before he was ready to. This is especially bad, and not just because he didn't have the proper experience. There's also a key difference between karting and formula racing.
The brute force that Joss had shown in mastering the technicalities of karting needed to be combined with a more delicate touch to understand the art and skill of personal dynamics in something so big and complex as our top F1 team.
Yost was considered the next big thing, but his star power quickly faded. It's quite tragic, really. In 1996, he returned to the circuit driving for Arrows and married Belgian karting champion Sophie Kumpen. She soon became pregnant. This finally leads us to Maximilian Verstappen was born September 30th, 1997 in Hasselt, Belgium. 1997. Just like... He has one younger sister, Victoria, who's a mommy influencer. He also has 3 younger half-siblings who are minors and will thus not be named. After Max's birth, Yost spent a couple of years out of the main Formula 1 circuit. He served as a reserve and test driver for Stewart in 1998. Then he was involved in Honda's unrealized Formula 1 project in 1999. In fact, the most notable thing he did in 1998 wasn't even racing. It was assault. In May of that year, he and his father, Max's grandfather, got in a fight with a 45-year-old man at a karting track in Belgium. They fought over who got to use the track, and the 45-year-old man was left with a fractured skull. Yost would be found guilty of assault roughly 2.5 years later. He was also handed a 5-year suspended sentence. But did this impact Yost's career at Formula 1? Not at all. In fact, in the same year the ruling was handed down, he got a proper seat back in the circuit with Arrows. He would score 5 points for them. They would even film a documentary series that year about him, his teammate, and all the ins and outs of Arrows. It's titled Racing Arrows and aired on ITV. Sadly, only a few clips from the series have resurfaced, and said clips have burned in Dutch subtitles and watermarks. But Yost does appear in them! Look! Look!
I think we have a very, very good car. It is up to the engineers to get everything out of it. But at the moment it's looking really good, and I'm very confident for the season.
Yost would race for Arrows again in 2001, then get kicked off the team in 2002 because he scored only 1 point in 2001. He would race once again for Minardi in 2003 before leaving the sport for good. He was considered for the Kick Sauber and Jordan teams in 2002 and 2004 respectively, but neither came to fruition because he was physically too large for those cars. Amidst the underwhelming end to an underwhelming career, we can finally shift our focus to Max. And we can talk about why, well, people don't really like Yost that much. Well, at least people outside of the racing circuit, if this is to be believed.
Within the racing world, Joss had always been widely respected as someone who gives absolutely everything of himself, and in repose he can be laid back, friendly, and very good company.
Being exposed to racing from an early age, it shouldn't come as a surprise that Max also wanted to race. As said by Yost himself,
"It all started when Max was 4. We always talked about the competition at home. I was often at the races and remembered he insisted often that I wanted to go race karts. I never forced him. I rather yielded to his urgent request."
Dude, I wasn't accusing you of forcing your kid into the sport. Besides, that does not absolve you of all the shit you pull later. So in 2001, when Max was 4, he was given his first kart. And this is when things get weird. At least in my opinion. Well, maybe not weird, but messy. To research Max's career, I got myself a copy of Mark Hughes' Unstoppable. It's an unauthorized biography of Max released in 2023. A lot of the quotes shown in this section and the last one come from this very book. Now, I can already hear some of you asking, "Flower, why are you using an unauthorized biography for your research? There's no official biography as of this writing. I've cross-referenced the information with other sources when I could. Mark Hughes followed motorsports for decades and wrote other books about other drivers. Please don't be mad at me. But I noticed something when the book talked about Max's early career. Hughes went out of his way to insist that no, Jost did not force his son into the sport and that he really wanted to start racing other people even when he was too young to start doing so by FIA regulations.
Jost was not the one who was pushed. The impetus came wholly from Max. The manner in which he would race would be entirely dictated by Jost, and unsurprisingly, it was extreme. But Max was unrelenting in his push.
Now, could this be true? Yes, but that extreme manner Max was trained in amounted to, well, child abuse at times. And I'm not exaggerating. My dad is a teacher and is thus required by law to report child abuse if he has reason to believe it's happening. I sent him some of the more infamous stories about Jost's treatment of Max, and this is what he had to say. To compound this, let's take a look at what Mr. Hughes said about present-day Max.
Talk to Max today. There's no apparent damage. He's very relaxed and sociable with a ready smile. The most special part of his personality is that he's not cowed by anything. He fears no one and reputations mean nothing to him and never have. He's straight talking and on track, he's always the dominant one in any tango. But there's been zero rebellion. Not as far as anyone knows.
No apparent damage? Man, I mean, I also come across as sociable, but just because I seem friendly doesn't mean I experience damage. Let's move on. The first controversial story involving Jost's training can be pinpointed to one winter. A year hasn't been confirmed, but it most likely happened between 2005 and 2007. Jost said in an interview that Max was 8 or 9 years old when this happened. That's what I'm basing this estimate off of. On days when school ended early for Max, Jost would take him to the go-kart track no matter the weather. Sun, rain, freezing, and one day...
I let the van run so Max could warm up, and then we did 10 laps. He was cold. I said, okay, go warm up. And then, 3 minutes later, Max was not back. Fuck! Where is he now? Come on! And Max would say, I'm still cold. And I would say, I don't care. Drive. And he couldn't move his fingers. And I didn't care. I wanted to test things because I was building engines and chasing chassis. And I wanted to have the result because I wanted to move forward.
You're disregarding your kid's comfort and welfare for the sake of what, a test? In that same interview, Max said he could barely move the steering wheel in the cold. What the hell were you trying to achieve here? I will admit, though, that this doesn't seem too bad at first. Reckless? Yes, but parents are people, aren't they? They make mistakes. After all, this was the story my dad said was just a dick move and would not warrant a call to CPS. But this wasn't a one-off. It was part of a repeated pattern of behavior. While Jost was training Max to become a champion, he always told him he would become the opposite. Max himself talked about this before.
Dad would tell me I was going to be a bus driver or a truck driver. He thought I was too lazy and laid back. He would say, God damn it, bastard, stupid pig, you're never going to make it. That's a summary of his reaction when he felt I didn't give it my all. He was really strict. In the end, that's what motivated me to prove him wrong, and that I could do it.
Yes, I know I cut out the part where Max said that he would tell him he was going to be a bus or truck driver, quote unquote, in a good way, but let's be serious. Is there any justification for that? Jost and Sophie divorced in 2008. According to those who witnessed it, the breakup was nasty to say the least. And there are official stories to back that up. Later that year, Jost appeared in a Belgian court after being accused of threatening and assaulting his now ex-wife. This would result in a fine and a suspended jail sentence. But what about Max? What about Victoria? They would have been 10 and 8 respectively during this time in their lives. I was 8 years old myself during that time, and if my parents separated in such a dramatic fashion, I don't think I would have come out the other side the same. Upon the separation, Sophie gained primary custody of Victoria. Meanwhile, Jost gained primary custody of Max. This is because Max was doing really well in his karting career and had to be with Jost to make it continue, at least at that time. But that doesn't mean things were easier for him. The divorce might have caused him to grow up too quickly. It might have made him be the mediator when he was too young for his brain to comprehend what was happening. As said by Mikel Varchika, a former karting teammate of Jost who managed CRG Karting, the team Max would eventually be a part of.
Max was always very cool. At the time, to be honest, I thought with Jost, if you are always shouting at your dog, you have to be shouting your whole life. And maybe Max did play the game. Jost was shouting, for us it was normal. But if I see now how Max is with other people, he never has any nerves. He is like, okay, I will do it another way. That's always been his reaction. So cool, so quiet. I must say, I like Jost. But sometimes he was not easy, and I think the way Max did manage it, stayed calm, didn't go immediately against him, just let him cool down before discussing things. I think that was already very clever. He knows how to keep the team together. He was already a kind of diplomat between Jost and the team, even as a kid. Of course, as a child, in the end, he really did listen always to Jost. But still, he did not immediately start shouting or reacting. For his age, he was very, very clever.
To me, this does not sound like gaining emotional intelligence. It sounds more like developing a defense mechanism in a high-stress environment. He had to quickly learn not to engage or escalate his father's behavior. Instead, he had to learn how to manage them diplomatically. Part of it also sounds like emotional distancing. That's a coping mechanism I developed as well in my adolescence. You appear emotionally unaffected by what your parent and/or abuser is saying. You put on a facade of seeming calm and collected and thus give yourself some layer of protection. But it comes with a catch. It causes you to grow distant from people. It makes you hesitant to rely on others. I've had instances where I engaged in emotional distancing. Whether my parents were yelling at me for a mistake I made or not doing something I promised to do, or when never mind. Max continued his karting career. He made it to the KF3 level when he was 12 after the FIA lowered the minimum age to participate to, well, 12. He would join the CRG karting team, and despite Jost still being in the picture, he wouldn't be the only racing-related figure in Max's life. CRG owner Giancarlo Tonini put it like this.
We provided all of the equipment and the mechanic, although Jost was Max's coach. Max was run by our team manager at the time, like all the other drivers. Max had always had a great relationship with all of the teammates and various team members.
His 2 seasons competing in KF3 were successful. He won the competition's Euro Series both times and came in second for the World Cup in 2010. In 2012, he would compete in both the KF2 and the KZ2 championships. What's the difference? The engine specifications and the driving styles required in each class. The specifics aren't important, but if you're curious, KF2 is like the automatic transmission to KZ2's manual. At least from what I was able to gather. I might be wrong, I apologize. The year wouldn't be as kind to Max. Jost would be arrested for the attempted murder of an ex-partner. That landed him 2 weeks in detention and took away precious preparation time from Max. Max would be pulled from the factory team he was in halfway through the season after Jost didn't get the results he wanted. And during the KZ World Cup finals, one of the most infamous Jost incidents would happen. Let's set the scene. Sarno, Italy, September of 2012. Max is geared up to win the championship. He is starting in pole position. In the second spot is an opponent 10 years older than him. For reference, Max would have probably been 14 at this point. The older Carter overtakes him by the second lap, but that's okay. Max has plenty of time to set things right. Another racer starts to catch up. Max doesn't want to battle them both, so he quickly tries to pass the first racer at a fast corner. This causes a collision that takes Max out of the race. Max's decision here was impulsive and perhaps a bit brash, and he would say as such in hindsight. Yost was less cordial about it, to say the least.
I had done so much for that race. I was mad. I tore down the tent and threw everything in the back of the van. I was so depressed. Max was crying.
The work he spent on trying to ensure a Max victory, the time they spent traveling to Italy, the money he spent, it all came to a boiling point. Fellow Carter and friend, Stan Pex, helped Max get his cart to the van after Yost refused to help him. He would later say of the incident,
Max wanted to come home with us, but he wasn't allowed. He had to deal with his angry dad for 1,800 kilometers. It's scary when Yost gets that furious. At least we were scared.
Stan's father, Richard Pex, would concur.
It was heartbreaking to see Max that disappointed, and we know Joss didn't like it when we consoled Max, so we had to be careful.
So what happened on that drive home? Max would try and talk with his dad, try and talk through what happened at the track. But Yost didn't want to hear anything. This would culminate in an argument where Yost leaves his, again, 14-year-old son alone at a gas station. Like, I don't even know what to say about that. It's just, Yost, what the actual fuck is wrong with you? I'll just let Max tell you the rest of what happened. I'm so pissed off by this that I can't continue.
I called my mom, and she was behind us on the motorway. 5 minutes later, she arrived. We were about to drive off, and then my dad returned with the van and was like, "Get in." But I do not want to hear a word, because my dad was with his, at the time, girlfriend. For sure, she talked to him and said, "You cannot do that." At the time, I wished I was able to throw him on the floor, but I wasn't strong enough. But inside, I had this anger towards him. I was desperate to show him how good I was.
Max and Yost would not speak to each other for a week after this incident, and years later, the latter would continue to justify it. He would say it was key to making Max the champion he is today, and while it kind of did, he won almost every single race in 2013, that does not justify Yost's actions. Even though Max himself would rationalize and justify what happened, what he did wasn't right. What kind of father does that? It's one thing to want your child to win, but it's another thing entirely to abandon your son at a gas station and justify it all in the name of winning. There's one more incident of abuse surrounding Max and Yost we should talk about. I saved this one for last because I couldn't find a specific date for when it happened, but I believe it happened sometime between 2011 and 2013. An incident happened on the track. It's unclear what it was, but I'm assuming Max either couldn't finish the race or didn't place well. Yost made Max walk several miles back to the hotel. A passerby would pick him up and give him a lift. But when Yost learned how Max got back sooner than expected, he drove him to the spot where he was picked up, left him there, and told him to walk back. Even if Max believes these incidents were essential to furthering his racing career, they were still deeply scarring. It seems more like instead of making Max faster or tougher, the point was for him to succeed on his father's terms. And I'd argue that Max might be carrying on those scars well into adulthood. Hell, before we continue the story, let's take a minute to talk about potential psychological effects of what Yost did to Max can come in many ways, and the effects can continue well into adulthood. For example, Yost criticizing Max on the track and pushing his high expectations onto him. According to a 2022 study from the American Psychological Association, such behavior can lead to children to develop perfectionism. You might not think of that as a bad thing, but the report adds perfectionism can contribute to several mental health conditions. That includes depression, anxiety, self-harm, and eating disorders. And I can speak from experience here. I've had a lot of self-inflicted pressure. I also experienced pressure from my family to excel in academics despite that self-inflicted pressure. Those would contribute to me developing all four in high school. It's a vicious cycle. Why? Because you never think you're doing enough. You never think you're doing enough even when your parents get off your back. You never think you're doing enough even when you get some of the highest exam scores in your school. I will stress that my parents were not abusive. They were just tough sometimes. And what I experienced was nothing compared to what Max went through. I love my parents, warts and all. Being raised in a controlling environment can also cause people to become hyper-independent. It can cause them to manage challenges independently instead of seeking help. Now, research on this is tragically scarce, but from the few studies I found, children of parents like Yost have a disrupted ability to process their emotions effectively. In turn, they rely on themselves more to have a sense of control. This is especially to avoid criticism or feelings that they aren't good enough. And again, this is something I relate to, but for different reasons. Being on the autism spectrum, I have issues with my emotions sometimes. I can isolate myself for hours, even days, just to try and process everything that I'm feeling. And because I have those issues processing my emotions, I too can be hyper-independent, only relying on myself to try and get things done. But most significantly, Yost's parenting style can make someone vulnerable to being exploited. That includes manipulation and grooming. According to various studies, abusive parenting styles can make it more difficult for someone to recognize the red flags of exploitation. That includes overstepping the boundaries of what's appropriate between adults and kids. That includes giving someone quote-unquote special attention. That includes manipulating trust to create secrecy or dependency. There are a couple of examples of Max being in grooming-like situations. In fact, one re-emerged just as I was starting to write this portion of the video. Some Twitter users found some flirtatious interactions Max had in 2012. They were with an older karting champion named Laura Tillett.
Hi Jess, I'm at Bayford tomorrow testing KF1 if you wanted to help with the front brakes.
KZ is much better.
Not tried KZ yet. Let me out in yours?
Yeah, no problem. Just bring me some seats and it's for free.
Deal! How have you been, Maxie?
Good, good. In Vegas now. And you?
Lucky. Not much, just working and training really. But you're all grown up.
Ah, okay. Well, I'm still growing.
Haha. Everyone's taller than me though, so it's not hard.
Not very difficult, yeah.
Laura was born on May 31st, 1991. She would have been 21 years old when these conversations happened. And Max, he would have been 15! What the fuck is wrong with you? Now, we obviously don't know if anything happened beyond these tweets, and it was Max who reached out to her and not the other way around. But when you're the adult in a situation like this, it's your responsibility to set the boundaries. It's your responsibility to not flirt with someone who is clearly a minor. You're supposed to be the one who knows better! And Laura clearly crossed that boundary many times. Her going all XX and bet you're all grown up to, again, a 15-year-old is not okay. It was not okay then, and it should not be tolerated now. But that's not the main incidence of grooming. Oh no. In 2015, as Max was entering the Formula 1 circuit, he entered into a relationship with Swedish racing driver Mikaela Olin Kotulinski. He was 17 when they got together, and she was 22! Okay, pause. I just have to say this. Did no one intervene in this? No single human being on the planet went, hey, this teenager who just got into Formula 1 is still like super young, might be getting groomed. Like, this relationship wasn't a secret. Mikaela posted pictures of him all the time. They're still up. Look at this one from his 18th birthday, where she straight up calls him love. And all the replies are encouraging this behavior. Or at the very least complicit in it.
He had no time for girls, he said. How on earth did you pull this off, Mikaela? Winky face.
Cute.
Aw, so sweet.
And again, I do not care if it was Max who pursued her. He was still a minor when they got together. That is not okay, and no one fucking intervened in this situation. Not even his parents? Society needs to have a long, hard talk about how older women can be groomers too. But no, it's sexist because you're grossed out that an older woman is with a younger man. Well, guess what? It's not sexist. Both are wrong. Older people taking advantage of much younger people is grooming, regardless of gender. Someone should have put a stop to this. What the fuck? And remember, these are just the cases we know. There could be more that haven't even been uncovered yet. One more tidbit before we continue. For this, we're going to dive a bit into neuroscience. Experiencing emotional or mental abuse as a child can stunt your brain development. According to the Dana Foundation, your brain rapidly changes during childhood. It especially changes when you're undergoing puberty. Abuse can reduce your hippocampus volume, make your amygdala hyperactive, and leave your prefrontal cortex underdeveloped. Those parts of the brain respectively deal with memories, emotional processing, and decision making. It can even affect your ability to detect threats. Let me repeat myself. Abuse can negatively impact your ability to process emotions, make decisions, and detect threats. All three of those, I feel, can make someone especially susceptible to grooming. Now, do we know if Max has any of those things? No, we've never seen his brain scanned before. But we do know he had a tough childhood. We do know he has had weird relationships with older women. And you probably don't know this, but he tends to trauma dump at times.
My dad did that once to a mechanic with a fork. Ik moest wel alles ervoor over hebben, zeg maar. Terwijl de andere kinderen voor leuk een beetje spelen, een beetje rond.
Ja, maar ik zeg, wat heb jij ervoor gelaten allemaal? Want je moet ook offers brengen, toch? Misschien voel je dat helemaal niet zo, omdat je doet wat je het leukste vindt, maar...
Ik vond het ook soms leuk om een zaterdag te gaan voetballen of zo. Snap je?
Maar dat wilde je vader niet hebben.
Nee.
Nee?
To work harder for it. And I think still, to my dad's liking, I think all the way to Formula 1, I still didn't work hard enough in his eyes. Not only for me, but for my whole family, because they also had to live for me, because my dad was away a lot, probably cost the marriage, and also my sister.
I hate it when child abuse is played off as a joke. I hate it when child abuse is played off as a joke. I fucking hate it when child abuse is played off as a joke. I've already seen my relationship abuse! Let's get back to our normal programming. Yost always had big aspirations for Max. The goal was always to get on the Formula 1 circuit, whatever it took.
Even as Max was competing in karts against the other kids, the goal of F1 was already explicit. There's footage of him as an 11-year-old being interviewed with Joss on Dutch TV, and when asked whether F1 was the goal, there's not the slightest ambiguity in Max's response. He was on a path, one which Joss had defined, but which Max never had to think about. Karting was just the means to the end.
His first official test in a race car was sometime in 2013. That's when he did a secret test using a Formula Renault 2.0 car. What's that? It's a common car used by people who have gone on to win F1 championships. It's still one step below Formula 3, but it was still a step above karting championships. And according to Tony Shaw, the Formula Renault team leader who oversaw the test, it went well.
Max didn't need any coaching either from other drivers or the engineers. He was just totally on point straight away. On his outlap in the wet tires, he was so committed, we were a bit disbelieving that this could really be his first time in a car. But Yost said seriously, it's his first time. He never put a foot wrong and was so deft with his controls. That caliber of driver makes the others look a bit wooden.
While the test was successful, the question of cost remained in the air. Yes, Yost was a former F1 driver, but he was never as notable as some of the other drivers of his time, like, say, Michael Schumacher. Financing was trickier. Then, Max got invited to a proper F3 test. It went successfully, but such a feat was even costlier to pursue. But luck would soon be on the Verstappen side. That winter, Lawrence Stroll, yes, that Lawrence Stroll, hosted a short series for drivers in F3 cars. The goal was to stake out emerging talent, seeing how they did against drivers at the Ferrari Driving Academy. At the time, Lawrence's son Lance was training there. Yeah, it cost 100k euros to participate, but someone put the money in. Specifically, businessman Huub Lothengatter, who helped finance Jost's F1 career all those years ago. Max did very well in the 12-race series. He scored 2 first-place wins, 1 second-place win, and 2 third-place wins. He even got pole position in 3 races. It wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, though. Jost butted heads with the race organizers. Why? because he didn't think the karts had consistent electronic systems. That would put Max at a disadvantage. That was another reason why he was so hesitant to let Max drive in Formula Renault. Unlike other Formula Racing Championships, Formula Renault cars all use the same engine. That engine is provided by the organizers, and even though Renault offered a clear path to getting into F1, Jost wanted control of his son's career. The aftermath of that, paired with advice from Rothengatter, made Jost consider having Max start in F3 instead. And in a phone call with the guy who set up the Formula Renault test in the first place, Jost said,
"There's a bigger chance we won't win in Formula Renault than we will win. But if we go F3, it's our first year. So if we don't win the championship, it's no big deal, and we can do it another year."
So Max was signed to Van Amersfoort Racing and made his F3 debut at the age of 16. It was meant to be a trial season before he could be a serious contender for the championship the year after. Things did not go as planned, but not necessarily in a bad way.
By June 2014, Max would become the hottest of F1 properties. Though they didn't know it, 16-year-old Max's speed in testing and practice for the opening round of the European F3 Championship immediately put him on the F1 radar. Red Bull team principal Christian Horner monitors the junior racing ranks closely, and even though he was at the Chinese Grand Prix that weekend, he found time to catch up with the F3 practice times. Verstappen had been third fastest in the first practice session, and fastest of all in the second session.
Max would ultimately win 10 of the 33 races that season and placed third in the Drivers' Championship. He was also the second highest scoring rookie, only behind a similarly aged Esteban Ocon. He even scored first in the International Masters of Formula 3 competition that July. I must stress though that despite Max's talent causing him to get courted by several F1 teams, including the one he was ultimately signed with, he was still a teenager. He was still undergoing high expectations and a great deal of stress. As recounted by journalist Linda Vermeeren, the second set of races that season in Germany were especially intense for him.
Both of Max's parents were there. There was drama, there were crashes. Jost got mad, his mom Sophie emotional. And Max, he was so young. It must have been so difficult at 16 years old to deal with all this. Having to deal with yourself at that age is hard enough, let alone dealing with the pressure of his parents and the expectations of the media and the entire motorsport community. I remember him standing in the garage, slightly dazed, picking at the carbon fiber nose of his F3 car. He'd broken that nose in a crash during the weekend's first race. You could read the disappointment on his face, and at 16 the resemblance to Jost was uncanny, both just as frantic. But you could tell he was intelligent. Great feedback, driven, focus, and a nice, humble character. While Jost frantically helped fix the car with an angry expression on his face, Sophie was there to comfort her son. "I saw the tears in his eyes," she said. "I would have loved to have given him a hug, but on track that's not done, of course," she said with a smile. A couple of hours later, I found Max still sulking. "I should have known better," he said sadly.
Come on, man. He was a kid. Kids make mistakes. Sure, it was a stupid mistake, but kids make stupid mistakes all the time. Hell, so do 18-year-olds. Hell, I should have known better when I was 18 and... No, we are not talking about her. We are not getting off topic. Max's racing would garner the attention of Helmut Marko, the quote-unquote guru for Red Bull Racing. An impressive interview and a 6-week winning streak encouraged Marko to directly sign him up for F1 for the 2015 season. The announcement was made in August of that year, and it was quite controversial, to say the least. Considering the racing prodigy Max is, it seems funny to think that people were weirded out at first, but people were genuinely concerned about a 16-year-old with only 1 year of experience in Formula racing going into F1, from journalists to former F1 champions.
I hope Max hasn't been accelerated up to F1 too quickly, because that can set you back for a very long time if you're not careful.
16 is too young because F1, the risk is high and you damage your reputation if you are not ready.
Some of the criticism was more cynical, with Red Bull Racing being accused of signing him as some kind of publicity stunt. Max at the time, and still is, the youngest ever driver to take part in the series. And this is Red Bull we're talking about. You know, the energy drink company that thrives off sponsoring risky sports ventures. And perhaps not so coincidentally, the FIA raised the minimum F1 age to 18 afterward. that went into effect in 2016. Max and those familiar with him quickly went on the defensive, saying he has what it takes to compete at that level.
We believe Max has the necessary maturity and mental strength to take on Formula 1 successfully. This year has already demonstrated how well he can cope under the difficult conditions. Bearing in mind that Toro Rosso was created to aim at bringing young talent from the Red Bull Junior team into Formula 1 to educate them, it will now be up to us to provide Max with a competitive car, which will enable him to have the best possible start to his Formula 1 career.
I think the biggest step I had was karting to F3. I think F3 to F1 will be a smaller step. I'm not that worried about it. The cars are really safe. I think it's more dangerous to bike through a big city than race in an F1 car.
But the defenses on Max's mental and emotional strength, even later down the line, were iffier.
I have no problems at all with mental strength. I'm really relaxed, and I don't want to think about mental stress or how strong you are mentally because, to be honest, I find it a bit bullshit.
At 16, Max was 5 years ahead of his age mentally. I could see the maturity and the commitment and how his program had been with Joss. He wasn't a kid when you met him. He was a very seriously committed racing driver who had shown a fantastic ability already.
Marco's assertion that Max was 5 years ahead of his age mentally or wasn't a kid seems like an attempt to justify how he was treated by Jos. He's rationalizing the intense conditions Max faced. He's downplaying how grueling his father's methods truly were. And it creates a narrative that aligned with a tough love mentality that can be used to justify or minimize abusive actions in high performance settings. And let's look at Max's dismissal of mental stress just as he was entering Formula 1. You can view that as a reflection of how deeply he internalized the demands placed on him by his father. His no-nonsense approach aligns with a worldview that equates mental strain with weakness. This could be both a defense mechanism and a byproduct of the tough love style he was raised under. It required him to adapt quickly to high-pressure situations without showing vulnerability. Despite the doubts, Max was signed. He would soon become the youngest person to ever participate in an F1 weekend. He took part in free practice at the 2014 Japanese Grand Prix right after turning 17. While this would be overshadowed by the tragic crash and subsequent death of driver Jules Bianchi, Max's performance would gain praise. That even though a power unit failure cut his practice session short.
He was very clean and tidy. To be 0.46 behind one of the actual Toro Rosso races is very solid.
I watched the Japanese Grand Prix first practice from my first sight of Max Verstappen in action. As usual, the two silver Mercedes of Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton was setting the pace, their grip visibly superior. The most remarkable thing about Verstappen's passage was perhaps that it didn't look any different compared to any of the others. It looked like he'd been doing this for years, fully confident with his entry speeds, very controlled and composed.
He would have similarly impressive results in the other two free practices he partook in. He landed in the top 10 for the US Grand Prix and the Brazilian Grand Prix. On March 15, 2015, Max made his official F1 debut at the first race of the season, the Australian Grand Prix. At 17 and 166 days old, he became the youngest ever driver to debut in the sport. The debut was a bit underwhelming. He placed 11th on the grid, 4 positions behind then teammate Carlos Sainz. He retired 32 laps in due to an engine issue, but 3 other drivers retired that same race and 3 more did not even start. Only 11 drivers finished it, so the race was cursed to begin with, no harm, no foul. And besides, before he had to retire, Max was in a point-scoring position. That has to account for something. But Jos, despite not being allowed to be as directly involved in his son's racing at the F1 level, wasn't having it.
Jos, as an experienced racer, having observed how the timing of Max's runs and tyre choices compromised his qualifying, had an input and he wasn't shy of expressing it. His teammates' strong performance aggravated the situation, and Jos went about using the implicit power of their position within Red Bull to ensure there was no repeat. Things changed in the Toro Rosso camp after that, and it's difficult not to detect the hand of Jos fighting his son's corner. Whatever was said, Marco subsequently gave Max and his engineers carte blanche to make their own timing and tyre choices, even against any choices made by then team principal Franz Tost, if necessary.
Hughes, back the fuck off! You clearly have issues relinquishing control of your kid's career. I understand that you want to protect him and make sure he has a good start, but you've been out of Formula racing for years. Things change. Max had a much better race at the Malaysian Grand Prix 2 weeks later. He finished 6th in qualifying and finished in 7th place overall. This earned him 6 points towards the World Championship. Sure, that's not much compared to what we see him achieve now, but he was the youngest driver ever to score points! Unsurprisingly, Yose's tune was just slightly different.
I'm very pleased with what Max has done today, and I'm most of all happy for himself that he finished the race and the way he raced. You could see he was struggling a bit at the beginning of the race as he lacked the confidence with his brakes. The team did an incredible job to call him in when the safety car was there, and you saw after that he went into his group, consistent and kept going. He did some very good overtaking, and I'm very proud.
I'm happy that my son is now the youngest point scorer in F1 history, but he did struggle at first because he wasn't confident with the brakes. Dude, your son just broke like his 2nd world record in 1 month! Don't use this time to criticize what you think he did wrong! What the fuck is wrong with you? The rest of Max's season would be, for the most part, good. He didn't score any top 3 finishes, but he scored points in 10 of that season's 19 races. That includes 2 4th place finishes. He finished 12th overall in the World Championship. That's impressive for a rookie starting in a junior racing team. He even won Rookie of the Year, Personality of the Year, and Action of the Year at the FIA prize-giving ceremony. And during that season, Max turned 18. He spent his birthday getting his actual driver's license, then moved to Monaco shortly afterward. Despite Monaco being known as a tax haven, and as someone who also moved out as soon as she could, I don't blame him. When you feel the more mature, leaving and getting your own place is the ultimate dream. It sure was mine when she... Then, without the least warning, a blue sea wave swelled under my heart, and from a mat in a pool of sun, half naked, kneeling, turning about on his knees, there was my Riviera love peering at me over dark glasses. It was the same child, the same broad, honey-hued shoulders, the same silky bare back, the same sandy head of hair, and as if I were the fairy tale nurse of some little prince, lost, kidnapped, discovered in rags, through which his nakedness smiled at the king and his hounds, I recognized the tiny dark brown mole on his side. With awe and delight, the king crying for joy, the trumpets blaring, the nurse drunk. I saw again his lovely indrawn abdomen where my southbound mouth had briefly paused, and those puerile hips of which I had kissed the crenulated imprint left by the band of his shorts. That last mad, immoral day behind the Roach's roses. The 27 years I had lived since then tapered to a palpitating point and vanished. It's time to bring Kelly and the Piquets back into the story. It's now 2016. Nelson Jr. is in his 2nd year of racing for Formula E. Kelly still has her social media and PR consultant role at Formula E. What exactly did that entail? Here's what I could gather. She updated the Formula E social media accounts. She coordinated ad campaigns with Formula E. She interviewed people related to the sport. She wrote blog posts related to the sport, but all of them have since been deleted. And she showed some behind-the-scenes action at races. All the normal stuff a PR person does. Now, one could argue Kelly was a nepo hire for Formula E racing. After all, her brother, Nelson Jr., was one of the very first racers for this new sport. Their father is a multi-time F1 champion. And if she didn't have those connections, I'd be suspicious of the long gaps between the jobs she worked. In the communications field, nepotism is sadly common. It's very much an it's not what you know, it's who you know field. And if you don't have the connections you need to get the job you want, even if you're more qualified, you're shit out of luck. In my opinion, this dependency not only puts individuals without connections at a disadvantage, but also creates an echo chamber where only those privileged receive these grand opportunities. Grand opportunities like Kelly's to travel the world promoting a whole new sport. But to quote the Coquette, one of the few good millennials.
Don't be an asshole. If you can get a dream job through family connections, fucking take it. Just be worthy of it. Pay your dues. Work your ass off.
Was Kelly worthy of her nepo job though? Well, she certainly worked. Some allege one of the main reasons she was there was so she could hook up with drivers. For example, one magical night where she and Max's paths definitively crossed. Now, what was Max up to? Well, he was just about to show up on Kelly's radar, and I have a theory on what got her attention in the first place. The 5th race of the 2016 season, the Spanish Grand Prix. The build-up. The start of the season was very good for Max. He finished 10th, 6th, and 8th in the first 3 races. Okay, yeah, he was forced to retire after 33 laps in the 4th race in Russia due to a power unit issue, but he had a promising start as the 9th driver on the grid that time. But Red Bull Racing was starting to eye the performance of one of its senior drivers. That driver placed 3rd in the 3rd race that season, but he was unable to start in the first race after an electrical issue. Not only that, but he also placed 7th in the 2nd race, behind the junior driver. The final straw was that 4th race in Russia. While he qualified 1 spot ahead of Max, he collided twice with former Red Bull driver and then Ferrari driver Sebastian Vettel. This forced the latter to retire. Vettel was already pissed with this driver as he felt he also cost him a victory in China. He confronted his former boss Christian Horner, telling him to get this driver under control. And on May 5th, 2016, 10 days before the Spanish Grand Prix, Red Bull Racing made an announcement. Max would be promoted to the main Red Bull team. Though Jos had a sense something was up, as Max recalls.
I got a call from my dad first at home in Monaco, and he said, "Max, I think there's a chance you're driving for Red Bull the next race in Spain." And I said, "Don't talk crazy, what are you talking about?" I didn't believe him. Then at some point, Helmut called and said, "You have to come to Austria." So we went for lunch. The hour went by, nothing was said, and I was thinking, why are we here? There was nothing coming out. Then suddenly Helmut said, "Oh, by the way, next week you're driving for Red Bull at Barcelona, so get ready."
So the Spanish Grand Prix rolls around. Max qualifies in 4th. The top 2 contenders for the World Championship take each other out in a collision. Max is now in 2nd place, but history is about to be made.
The sun is out, the smiles will be out. At 18 years and 227 days old, Max Verstappen wins a Formula One Grand Prix, wins the Spanish Grand Prix, and is the youngest driver ever to win a Formula One World Championship Grand Prix, and at the tender age of 18.
Max's win shattered several records, and not just youngest driver ever to win a Grand Prix. Max also became the youngest driver to score a top 3 finish in a Grand Prix and lead a lap during an F1 race. He was also the first person of Dutch descent to win a Grand Prix and the first winner to be born in the 90s. On a personal level, you must remember Max was still 18 and in a whole new country. He was soon to be single and, well, alone in this brave new world. And Kelly and Nelson Jr. were both in Europe. Kelly because that's where Formula E is headquartered, and Nelson Jr. was in Monaco for his racing. There is conclusive evidence for this. Here are some Instagram posts he made at that time. Kelly was also in Monaco in May for the Monaco Grand Prix. She posted about it on Instagram. Now, we know for certain Max and Nelson Jr. were aware of each other professionally. They're both Formula racers. As I've said, that circle is incredibly small, and they most likely got to know each other on more of a personal level at some point. Was it when they were both in Monaco? We don't know. Because the circle is so small, there's a chance they knew each other beforehand. You know, when Max was a minor! We also know the Piquets have long-standing ties to Monaco. Kelly and her siblings grew up there to an extent, and they owned property in the city-state in 2016. Kelly just didn't spend time there because of her Formula E career. As with Nelson Jr., there's a chance she knew of Max before they officially met. He was all over motorsport news with the records he was shattering after all. But we know roughly when Kelly at least tried to pursue Max. This is because one of her forms of flirting was the ever so popular, like what they post on Instagram and hope they notice technique. Kelly's first like on Max's account came on June 19th, 2016. Max makes 2 posts, one celebrating Father's Day and another getting ready for the Grand Prix in Baku. That was only the 3rd race after Max's Spanish victory. Kelly likes both of them. Remember, he is 18 and she is 27. It gets worse come September. Between then and Kelly's last like in October, Max made 41 posts on Instagram. Kelly liked 24 of them. Yes, I counted. 20 fucking 4. Here they are in all their glory. Again, it's that, like in a lot of the posts my crush makes, but not all of them so I don't seem like a stalker, ew strategy. But what about Max? Does he appear in Kelly's likes? So the first post on Kelly's account that Max liked came on August 9th, when she posted about a hike she did in Monaco. He would then like 2 other posts by her in August and 8 of her posts between September and October. So what can we conclude? By September, they were definitely aware of each other's existence, but they were probably acquainted beforehand. This leads us to the so-called magical night, the moment Max and Kelly's paths definitively crossed, for better or worse. Probably worse. So what happened? Now, we don't know for certain when this magical night occurred, except for that it was in 2016. But I'd argue it probably happened between June and September of that year, with it most likely happening in August. August is the traditional summer break for formula racing, and as we've established, Kelly was in Monaco at the time. Kelly would also be on break in August and September, as the Formula E season wouldn't begin until October. Max and Nelson Jr. met with Kelly in Monaco. She would later recall it like this in the 2022 Vogue Netherlands interview. How did you guys meet?
Max was friends with my brother Nelson, and we all went out for dinner in Monaco one night. That was 6 years ago, in 2016.
He was still very young then.
Yes, but there was already something magical that night. And I'll leave it at that. Our connection started then. Maybe one day we'll reveal the whole story, but I'm careful of what I say. On the internet, everything goes off the rails so quickly. It's best to keep some things between us and us alone.
That's suspicious. You're just going to leave it as saying something was super magical that night? You realize people are going to suspect there's more to the story, no? And what would you know? There's more to the story! An alleged Formula One insider contacted the now lost anti-Kelly account POV Kelly Piquet on TikTok with what they claimed is the true story. For privacy reasons, their identity is unknown, but the account claimed they received proof they're an F1 insider. According to them,
Max's girlfriend was visiting him in Monaco for the weekend, and Max, the girlfriend, Nelson's girlfriend, and Nelson all went out clubbing the second night, and Kelly decided to join them. Then Kelly left the club with Max, so Max abandoned his then-girlfriend at the club, and Kelly went back to his place to sleep with him. His girlfriend ended up spending the night with Nelson, and his girlfriend was devastated. Kelly absolutely knew she was in the club too, and didn't care. So, in summary, Kelly stole Max from his then-girlfriend.
That girlfriend, by the way, is purported to be Dutch model and businesswoman Loes van der Aa. She was 22 to Max's 18 at the time. Still eyebrow raising, I know, but less so than Michaela and Kelly. Regardless if that's the story or not, Max and Kelly's romantic connection sparking when he was 18 and she was 27 raises several concerns. Many of them have to do with the age difference. Firstly, Max was still in his early stages of emotional and personal development. Yes, he was 18, but he was still the new kid on the Formula One circuit. He was still trying to come to terms with his newfound fame, fortune, and adulthood. Kelly, on the other hand, was well established in her life experiences by 27. She had a couple of boyfriends, she was engaged once, just like me, and she had a better sense of who she was and what she wanted in life. Was Max prepared to navigate a relationship with someone with more life experience, or was he more susceptible to Kelly's presence, perspectives, and expectations? Second, this large age gap leads to an issue about power dynamics. There's no evidence to suggest Kelly sought to control the relationship, at least intentionally, but the age and experience gap could have tilted the balance in her favor. She had the social, emotional, and situational advantages. Max was still finding his footing in his professional and personal lives. Was he in a position to assert his own needs and desires effectively? And finally, let's set the age gap aside. The very nature of their initial meeting raises ethical questions. This is especially if what the insider claims is true. If Kelly knowingly pursued Max despite him being in a relationship, it muddles the narrative further. Was this the beginning of a genuine mutual connection, or was there a degree of manipulation involved? And remember, this is only their first confirmed meeting. Again, it could have happened earlier, when Max was a minor. The mutual likes between Max and Kelly stopped on October 10, 2016. That's when Max made his last like on her account for some years. And it came 3 days after Kelly posted this picture on her Twitter. Why is this picture important? Because Max is not the only Formula driver Kelly is alleged to have had relations with in the mid-2010s. The guy in the blue is former Formula 1 and then Formula E driver Jerome D'Ambrosio. Like Nelson Jr., he found much more success in the latter sport. The year before he started driving for Formula E, he married American-Chilean woman Natalie Sifferman. They divorced in 2015. Why? Because Kelly allegedly had an affair with Jerome. The same insider talked about this on POV Kelly Piquet.
At that time, Kelly was absolutely a nobody. She was just known for her father and her need for attention. So she ended up doing some blogging for Formula E, and that's where her true colors came out. So everyone knew she was dying to date a driver, and no one liked her. She would purposefully try to befriend drivers and make her rounds. One of them being Jerome, Natalie's husband at the time. They weren't even married a year, and she kept getting sent pictures from the media of her with him talking super close and always together. She then found out they would go on shopping trips, and he would stay extra days in whatever city to spend time with her.
Again, take it with a grain of salt. But in May of 2024, Natalie commented on a TikTok claiming that Kelly did indeed have an affair with her ex-husband. I emailed Natalie for more details, but I never got a response. I imagine it's something she doesn't like talking about, which I understand completely. I hope she's doing well wherever she is. Kelly's likes on Max's Instagram continued through October 23rd, but Max's affiliation with the Piquets did not end there. Nelson Jr. would visit Amsterdam in February of 2017. He would post photos of himself out and about with Max, who at the time was 19 to Nelson Jr.'s 31. Max would also fly in a private jet with Nelson in June of that year. He would then not appear in any of Jr.'s photos. Kelly would ultimately leave her Formula E job in December of 2016. Later on, she would allege it was because of burnout from near constant travel, but rumors claim it was because she slept with Jerome and blocked Natalie from Formula E socials. Jesus Christ, girl! Now, I legally cannot confirm nor deny rumors that Kelly desperately wanted to date a driver, but I can show her in the likes of other drivers at the same time. Here's her in the likes of Carlos Sainz. Here's her in the likes of Jerome D'Ambrosio during their alleged affair in 2015 and 2016. Some also say she was in the likes and comments of the most goated F1 driver of the 2010s, Lewis Hamilton. Sadly, this cannot be 100% confirmed, as Lewis deleted all his pre-2018 Instagram posts a long time ago. She definitely was in his likes and comments though, and looked at stories on Lewis fan pages. You have Instagram gossip channels to thank for that. But it could bring another layer to why the Piquets hate him so much. You know, aside from the racism. The lovely Anon on Tumblr summarized what allegedly happened for our enjoyment.
Take this as you wish. Yes, the hatred towards Lewis became a thing after he rejected Kelly. He never paid attention to her, really. She would message him on Insta and try to see him many times, but she was unsuccessful. Junior tried to help her out by following Lewis and trying to be his friend, which didn't work either. Whenever Monaco Grand Prix was coming, Kelly would fly to Monaco before she lived there to visit Nelson if he was there. If he wasn't, she would spend some time there as a break. Which is bullshit. She was there to see Lewis, but he was busy with other women. She still lived in New York when one time one of her friends let her know Lewis was coming back to New York and was going to attend a party that someone this friend knew was going to attend as well. He tried to get in, but it never worked out. After all her failed attempts to get noticed by Lewis, she started to like and comment on his posts constantly. Most of the comments are gone now, but she was all over his Insta. Then she managed to attend one of the parties Lewis was at, but again, she wasn't able to get his attention. This is when she slept with Carlos. I don't know much about this, but I do know it went on for a while until Carlos dumped her. From what I've heard, she thought a relationship could come out of this, but Carlos never spoke to her again. He follows her still, but they never spoke again. After that, she tried to go for Daniil Kvyat, but he was taken at the time. She was all over his comment section, but deleted all of them.
The only evidence of Kelly going after that last driver that remains is a like on his Instagram from the end of the 2016 season. Also, here's Kelly and Lewis Hamilton's early 2018 likes, just for kicks. But Kelly would soon get lucky. Not with Daniel or Carlos or Lewis or even Max, but with Daniil Kvyat. I probably butchered that, I apologize. Kvyat was born April 26, 1994 in Ufa, Russia. He started karting at the age of 9 and scored his first victory in 2005 at a competition in Sochi. He entered the Formula circuit in 2010. He started in the Formula Renault Championship Max almost did as a teenager. He got good results, coming in first in Formula Racing Championships in 2012 and 2013. And by 2014, he was a full-time driver for Toro Rosso. According to Helmut Marko, Kvyat had a lot of potential as a driver.
Whenever we put Daniil in a car, his efforts were remarkable. If a young driver proves talent, passion, and a high level of work ethic, we give him a chance. It's that perspective that is why we chose Kvyat for the team.
And his first race was pretty good, certainly better than Max's. He finished in 9th place. It was a point-scoring position only 3 seconds behind his then teammate. He actually broke the record at the time for the youngest racer to score points in F1. That record was beaten again by Max the next year, but still. The rest of the year would not be as kind to him. He only had 4 other point-scoring finishes the entire season, and had to retire several times, including in 3 consecutive races. The plan for 2015 originally was to leave Daniil in Toro Rosso and have Max be his teammate, but that had to change when then Red Bull Racing driver Sebastian Vettel made a surprise announcement. That announcement, he would be leaving the team to join Ferrari 1 year before his contract was set to expire. Max was still 17, and Red Bull Racing didn't think he was ready for a proper seat on the senior team, so they had no real choice but to promote Daniil to the position. Was it the right move? I suppose it was. Daniil finished the 2015 season in 7th place, 3 points ahead of teammate and 2014 3rd place finisher Daniel Ricciardo. But he only got 1 top 3 finish that year. This can be disappointing to a team whose driver, again, finished in 3rd place in 2014! So I guess now is the time I reveal the mystery Red Bull driver Max replaced in 2016. You know, the one who collided with Sebastian during the Russian Grand Prix, causing the latter to yell at Christian Horner? The one who finished behind the junior driver in the second race of the season? Daniil. It was Daniil. And according to him, he was totally blindsided by it.
I was in Moscow, lying on the sofa and watching a TV series, and then the phone call came. It was Helmut Marko. Hello, well, we have some news for you. And there was a 20-minute talk about... There was no real explanation, to be honest. I think if the bosses wanted something to happen, they just make it happen. Simple as that. The people who made the decision can give a better answer for the reason. It's a question for them. We finished the talk, and I went back to my TV series.
Fun fact, that show Daniil was watching? It was Game of Thrones. How poetic. The rest of Daniil's 2016 season could have been better. He finished 10th in Spain with an extra point for the fastest lap, but he only had 2 other point-scoring finishes otherwise. It wasn't all hopeless, though. He finished the season 4 points ahead of 2009 world champion Jenson Button. He was re-signed to Toro Rosso for the 2017 season. Around this time, October through December 2016, he met Kelly. They met allegedly after a mutual acquaintance set them up on a blind date. Daniil was smitten, and Kelly got what she wanted. He was 22, and she was 27 or 28. Yes, there's still an age gap here. No, it's not as problematic as the 9-year one where we don't even know if Max was a minor when they originally met. But there are still issues here. The 6-year age gap could have introduced uneven power dynamics. Remember, Kelly's family has high-profile status in motorsport. That could have given her more influence in certain aspects of their partnership. This isn't to say their relationship was inherently unhealthy. It's just, it might have required extra effort to maintain an equal footing. Kelly would accompany Daniil to races, being a good girlfriend or something. But 2017 would not be a kind year for him. He only had 2 point-scoring finishes by the halfway point of the season, much fewer than his then teammate Carlos Sainz. The last straw came in that year's Singapore Grand Prix, when he crashed 11 laps in and had to retire. So he was replaced by then rookie Pierre Gasly. Again, the world of motorsport is just a giant circle. Daniil would drive one more time in the season when Sainz made a sudden team switch. Even though he finished 10th and scored points, he was let go 5 days later. And what was Kelly doing career-wise at this point? Well, nothing, really. The only thing of note she did was an interview as a quote-unquote influencer for luxury brand Frescobo Carioca's in-store magazine. It's nothing special, just your run-of-the-mill generic fluff. It also incorrectly lists her as still working for Formula E, despite, again, her LinkedIn saying she left in December of 2016. She went to Venice. She went to South by Southwest with a quote-unquote interactive badge. She then didn't post for a month and made this weird-ass flex.
A week off Instagram was so good, I decided to take a few more days off. What did I miss? A whole lot of nothing.
Girl, no one cares if you take time off social media. I post like once every blue moon and no one asks where the fuck I've gone in between. She went to Spain for the Spanish Grand Prix. It happened the same weekend as Formula E's Monaco E-Prix. She went to Canada for the Canadian Grand Prix. It happened the same weekend as Formula E's Berlin E-Prix. Do I have to say any more to prove Kelly wasn't working for Formula E anymore at this point? She was in Cannes for vacation in August. She went to the Singapore Grand Prix that September. Then Daniil got the boot for that incident 11 laps in. So all in all, Kelly was just following her boyfriend like a lost puppy that whole year. 2018, Daniil spent the year as a test and development driver for the Ferrari racing team. Unlike past test driver roles I mentioned, Daniil focused on the team's simulator. He only raced during one wet weather test. And that's all I can say he did. Only 2 posts from 2018 survive on his Instagram account, and there are no records for anything else. Meanwhile, Kelly spent some time in Brazil. She posts a small handful of pics in nature and with friends, but without a driver to follow her around, she needs a new angle. A new, shall I say, X factor. So she decided to have a go at health coaching. That February, she got certified as a health coach by the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. What is that? It's an online school that teaches people a holistic approach to health and wellness. Think about like diet adjustments, exercise, and changing your mindset. But it does not qualify someone to be a nutritionist or a dietitian. Why? Because you need actual university work to get you qualified for that. It also doesn't give you a job with the Institute. I only say that because Kelly's LinkedIn claims that's where she has worked since 2018. Instead, you're expected to start working for a health coach business or quote-unquote be your own boss and start your own. Kelly would launch her new health coaching business in June 2018. June 2018. Same time I met her. No, we can't think of her right now. I moved on. She posted a total of 6 articles before giving up on the grift 1 month later. And I'll be honest, for someone who wanted to be a health coach, she wrote the wellness equivalent of fast food. It's the most generic advice I've seen without any actual substance attached. Want to balance your blood sugar? Eat lots of greens and whole grains. Cut sugary drinks from your diet. Want to jumpstart your weight loss? Stay hydrated and active throughout the day. Want to improve your gut health? Try yogurt and kombucha. You know, 2 things that are commonly known to have probiotics in them. Kelly's health coach certificate also expired in July, and she never bothered to renew it. For some reason, though, it's still on her LinkedIn. Oh, and one more thing. During this grift, Kelly was also taking classes with a culinary and wellness program called Plant Lab. 1 month after Kelly gave up, all of said school's classes were canceled. Why? Because its CEO got arrested and pleaded guilty to 35 counts of embezzlement. A few months later, Kelly and Daniil's daughter was conceived. This resulted in another content shift in March of 2019. Starting that month, she frequently posted pics of her pregnancy and talked about how excited she was to become a mom. That includes posting the same photo twice within 2 months for an unknown reason. Meanwhile, Daniil returned to the F1 circuit. He got rehired by Toro Rosso and drove with them for a whole season. He managed a decent handful of point-scoring finishes. In fact, he got his last ever top 3 finish in Formula racing just 1 day after his daughter was born. Less cool is Kelly posting the birth announcement while her daughter still had fluid on her. This is my censorship, not hers. Why didn't you wait until the child got cleaned up, you weird person? Despite the child being born, it was not meant to be for Kelly and Daniil. In December of that year, the two broke up. Daniil stayed in Monaco, while Kelly took the kid and moved back to Brazil. In a since deleted Instagram post, Kelly implied that she was the one who initiated the breakup.
Roses are red, violets are blue. Garbage is dumped and so are you.
Allegedly! She also spread rumors that Daniil cheated on her and that's why she broke up with him. Or at the very least, she encouraged those rumors to be spread. I couldn't find any posts directly accusing him of cheating on her and whatnot, but I have found posts around social media talking about said rumors.
Y'all ever think that Daniil might have cheated on her with that whole trash is dumped stuff?
Daniil doesn't look like a cheater. He seems too genuine. When Kelly, on the other hand, is a different story. To be honest, I believe Daniil cheated on her because the relationship ended abruptly, and I didn't think anyone would want to break up right after they had their baby unless something serious happened.
What I understood from the whole Daniil and Jelly drama is that Kelly cheated on him first. He didn't leave her because they found out she was pregnant at the time. And then Daniil cheated on her when Jelly took the child to Brazil without his permission. That rumor was a banger in Monaco for like a week.
But other rumors state that Daniil actually broke up with her. Some people who claim to have been in Monaco or worked for the Piquet say as such.
Kelly wants to be the Kim Kardashian of Monaco. It's the main reason why Daniil and her was never going to work. I can't say who I am, but I know everyone involved. Believe me or don't, but Daniil is just very normal, doesn't like partying too much, has a close circle of friends, and isn't interested in doing much social media or being super PR friendly. Kelly wanted more and wanted to become an it couple, whereas Dan just wanted to have a relatively quiet life. They split for 2 reasons. First one being that she cheated on him with a few different guys. The second reason was because he found out that when he was away at races, she was bringing in a nanny to look after their daughter and spending the entire time partying.
We know how desperate Kelly was to get with Max. She was chasing him around until she finally got what she wanted. Her mom, who's also a gold digger, encouraged her to do this, and that's why the family supports Max so much. They never showed this support with Daniil because they couldn't benefit from him in any way. We also know that she cheated on Daniil, not with Max, but with somebody else. That old trash break up post, she was trying to make it look like she was the one that broke up with Daniil, when in fact Daniil was the one who broke up with her. Not for cheating, but because Daniil was more of a family guy. and she wanted to be out partying and drinking all the time. While Daniil was away, Kelly most of the time left their child with the nanny, like she does know until Daniil found out about it. And that's what led to the breakup.
A few things about that second story. Rumor has it that Sylvia intentionally hooked up with Nelson Sr. to be with an F1 world champion. She still uses the Piquet surname despite being long divorced from Nelson Sr. She frequently posts about Kelly, since she's the only one of her children who bagged an F1 driver just like her. She actively defended her husband in the light of some controversies that we will get to. And allegedly, she peed on someone's hotel bed while still trying to work her magic with drivers. Swear I'm not making this up. I promise I'm not making this up. I saw that story with my own two Christian eyes. It's on Twitter. But to make a long story short, in the 70s and 80s, there was a lot of infighting between the FIA, F1 teams, and drivers. This culminated in a strike before the 1982 South African Grand Prix. The drivers all sleeping together in a hotel dining room. Why specifically the dining room? To peer pressure people into not backing out. So how does Sylvia factor into this?
Many of the drivers went to the hotel with their wives or girlfriends and asked journalist Giorgio Piola to take them out to dinner on the night of the strike, and there was one of them who was especially upset by the situation. It was Sylvia Tamsma Piquet, then Nelson Piquet's girlfriend. She had been having a strong grudge against the way he was treated by his team, so I believe the whole situation with the unannounced clause that kept him at the team made her particularly angry. Well, Giorgio took them all out to dinner at the hotel where then head of FIA subsidiary FISA, Jean-Marie Balestri, was staying. On one occasion, Sylvia got up and asked permission to go to the bathroom with some others. Giorgio was surprised, but when they returned, everything seemed normal. The next day, the controversy came to a head. Jean-Marie returned to his room after dinner and found a puddle of urine on the bed where he was supposed to sleep. The culprit, they later discovered, was Miss Sylvia.
What the fuck am I even supposed to say? What were we even talking about again? Oh right, Sylvia's older daughter bagging an F1 driver. Despite Daniil being an F1 driver, he wasn't a particularly notable one. Remember that he spent most of his career on Red Bull Racing's junior team. He wasn't on the same level of fame as, say, Lewis Hamilton or Max Verstappen. Speaking of, I don't have any pre-World Drivers Championship Max merchandise in my apartment, so I'm gonna have to make do with this. I really did not want to wear the polo again. Anyway, let's talk about what Max was up to during this time. 2017 was a good year for Max. He had 4 top 3 finishes. He finished 6th in the Drivers' Championship. He stopped regularly interacting with the PKs on social media. And he started to see someone close to his age. German-Turkish student Dilara Sonlik was 19 to his 20 when they got together. From what I was able to gather, their relationship was healthy. Dilara was a private person, much more private than Kelly, but photos and videos of the two together show them happy. She also got along with his family to the point where they all still follow her on Instagram. Max's racing also improved as time went by. He had 11 top 3 finishes in 2018, with 2 of those being straight up wins. He finished 4th in the Drivers' Championship. He was not only just 2 positions above longtime teammate Daniel Ricciardo, but he was also only 2 points behind previous world champion Kimi Räikkönen. 2019 would be even better. Max would finish 3rd in the Drivers' Championship that year. Sure, he only had 9 top 3 finishes that year, but 3 of those were straight up wins. He also had a fair share of 4th place finishes to boost his score. Now, I mentioned these scores for a reason. Some pundits like to pretend Kelly was what ultimately matured Max. They say her influence was what made him a multi-time world champion. That's a viewpoint I disagree with for various reasons. Firstly, he was improving on his own before her and had the potential to become a champion at some point. It's rare for drivers' champions to knock it out of the park in the first few years of their game. For example, the youngest world champion as of this recording is Sebastian Vettel. He finished 8th in his first full F1 season, 2 years before his first championship. In his first season with Mercedes in 2010, Nico Rosberg finished 7th. He would win his only drivers' championship before retiring in 2016. Hell, Ayrton Senna himself finished 9th in his first F1 season way back in 1984. Second, it's called formula racing for a reason. Unlike NASCAR or the likes of it, not every car is created equal. Each team has to use a specific formula for their cars each year. A good driver can't always score points if they have a bad car. Max wouldn't be able to score as nearly as many points as he did in, say, 2023 if he was driving for Williams instead of Red Bull. Hell, the Red Bull racing car was so good that year, Max's teammate finished second in the Drivers' Championship. Seriously, compare their scores in 2023 with their scores in 2024. It's not just the driver that makes a race. And third, it's wrong to attribute hard work and years of practice to some rando who happens to be in your life now. Linking personal growth or maturity solely to a romantic partner oversimplifies individual development. Growing and developing is a multifaceted, complicated process. It involves life experiences, it involves internal motivations, it involves external challenges. Research shows relying on a partner for change can hinder your own development. I also say this because Kelly, at least to me, seems like she enjoys the narrative that she's the one behind Max's wins. She likes to think that she's such an important asset in his life. She tries to show their love is the greatest thing since sliced fucking Wonder Bread. But she needs him more than he needs her. Hell, she would need any driver more than any other driver would need her. Why? Well, I'd argue that Kelly's pursuit of Max was a long con. Despite being with Daniil, Max was the goal all along. And if she couldn't get him, she had a different, young, up-and-coming driver to pursue as a backup. And I'm not talking out of my ass. I have receipts from Instagram. Let's go to the conspiracy board. Here's what we know so far. Max has known the Piquet since 2016 at the very latest. He was friends with Nelson Jr. Kelly learned of him and stalked his Instagram. Their magical night happened. Then in mid-2017, Max stopped showing up on the Piquet's feeds. But that doesn't mean the Piquets didn't stop showing up on Max's or his family's. First, let's travel back to 2017. Before Victoria's 18th birthday, she posts a mirror selfie on Instagram. Nothing unusual, nothing out of the ordinary, until you notice it was liked by Nelson Jr. What the fuck, man? You were like 32 at that point. Why are you in the likes of your friend's minor sister? That's so fucking weird. This doesn't tie much into the Max dynamic, but it was so weird that I had to bring it up. Let's move on to 2018. As a reminder, this is the year Daniil served as a development driver for Ferrari. He wasn't on the track often. Kelly spent a few months on her health coach grift. Her surviving photos from the time come from Brazil, but on August 23rd, Kelly made this post.
Will forever be my favorite. #spice, #childhood dream come true.
For those of you younger than 23, Kelly is posing with Gary Halliwell, who is most known for being one of the Spice Girls. Specifically, she was Ginger Spice. Since 2015, Gary has been married to Christian Horner. That name sounds familiar, no? Including Christian Horner, the longtime racing principal for Max's team.
Red Bull team principal Christian Horner.
He confronted his former boss, Christian Horner, causing the latter to yell at Christian Horner. So yeah, that's not just the Spice Girl, that's the wife of Max's boss and Daniil's former boss. What the fuck is this? September 14, 2018, Max's sister Victoria makes a post from Singapore. Clearly she's there to support him racing. It's liked by Kelly. Kelly proceeds to leave several likes on Victoria's Instagram between 2018 and 2019, and clearly that got Victoria's attention. On September 22nd, she would like a post on Kelly's account. She would continue to appear in Kelly's likes throughout 2018 and 2019. So what can we take from this? Well, these interactions on social media weren't just casual. They show Kelly strategically inserting herself into Max's circle long before their relationship, all the way back when he was still seeing Delora. Kelly's persistent likes show deliberate attempts to remain on the Verstappen's radar. She was subtly embedding herself into Max's family orbit. And Victoria's eventual engagement in Kelly's posts suggests these efforts were reciprocated. Was it out of politeness or genuine friendship? We don't know. Now, this mutual visibility might seem benign, but we need to look at it in the context of grooming. Why? Because it reflects how Kelly gradually fostered acceptance within Max's social space. Establishing connections with your victim's family members is a part of grooming behavior. According to various domestic abuse and rape nonprofits, groomers can try and establish themselves as trustworthy or safe individuals, quote unquote. In doing so, they reduce suspicion from those close to the victim. They might use wit and charm to connect with family members. They might position themselves as allies or responsible figures. And in turn, that can make family members more comfortable with them being around the victim. And it's not just Victoria that Kelly gained this rapport with. She also seemed to have gained the trust of Max's mother, Sophie, at least to an extent. Do you know how your friend's parents sometimes follow you on Instagram and like your posts? At first, it had that vibe. She would like some of the posts Victoria liked, mostly about her pregnancy. She even congratulated her when she made her birth announcement. I could only find one instance of Kelly and Sophie's likes at the time, but to be fair, Sophie doesn't post on Instagram much. A lot of her posts with Dollara are still up, while she only has one featuring Kelly. Make of that what you will. Kelly's behavior fits into a broader framework of grooming dynamics. By integrating herself with Max's family, she not only gained their trust, but she also laid the groundwork for her eventual romantic relationship with Max. And she was able to do that despite the significant concerns this timeline raises. And that's not all! Remember how I said Kelly might have pursued another driver as a backup? Well, let me introduce you to Lando Norris. Lando Norris was born November 13th, 1999 in Bristol, England. That makes him exactly 6 months older than me, which makes what I'm about to say even weirder. He did Formula Renault in 2016, Formula 3 in 2017, Formula 2 in 2018, and then got promoted to Formula 1 full-time in 2019. And in those early years, he also showed a lot of promise. He finished first in 2 Formula Renault series, as well as F3. He finished second in F2. He scored the second fastest lap time in a 2017 F1 test. McLaren Racing would announce Lando's signing to the team on September 3rd, 2019. 27 days later, it's Max's 21st birthday! Lando posts a photo of them together from their karting days. Remember, motorsport is just one big circle. Max doesn't like it, but guess who does? Fucking Kelly, that's who! Kelly would like several more of Lando's posts throughout October, but he had them being pictures where he shows his face. And he was still 18 at the time. On October 16th, Lando reciprocated. Kelly advertises a VIP Grand Prix experience from the company Madeline Maye. It would be liked by him. This back and forth between them would continue for the rest of 2018 and into 2019. It would continue through Kelly's pregnancy. In fact, he likes a lot of posts during her pregnancy, to the point where one of his likes was on her post promoting breastfeeding. Lando. Dude. What the fuck? Oh, in case you didn't think it could get worse, I found out he liked some of her photos from 2016. You know, when he would have been a minor. So I can conclude Kelly was trying to get into Lando's good graces the same time she was weaving her way into the Verstappen family circle. Paints an unsettling picture of Kelly's social media interactions. They're actions that seem far too calculated to be innocent. Let's break it down. Lando's rise in motorsport coincided with Kelly's forays into Max's circle. Her likes on Lando's post suggested a deliberate effort to capture his attention. Lando reciprocating Kelly's engagement with likes adds an odd dynamic. This dynamic gets weirder when Lando stated her likes during her pregnancy. This raises questions during her pregnancy. This raises questions about the nature of their exchanges. Lando was still barely an adult at the time. This attention from someone significantly older can blur those boundaries, because remember, Lando was still barely an adult at the time! And as we saw, Kelly's behavior ran parallel to her trying to get the attention of Max's family. This overlap suggests she may have been trying to hedge her bets. She could have been scouting multiple connections within the sport. The focus on Formula Racing's brightest young stars shows a pattern of targeting impressionable people. Kelly's actions during this period become more troubling when you consider this. She was still in a relationship with Daniil, who, in 2018, was not an active F1 driver at the time. Grooming often involves building trust and fostering dependence, and Kelly's consistent likes on Max and Lando's posts align with the desire to embed herself in their lives. Her actions suggest she wanted to present herself as a figure of influence, and that she wanted to do so while keeping ties with a partner whose own career was in jeopardy. This overlap implies a calculated strategy to secure access to F1's next generation of stars. In light of these dynamics, Kelly's behavior raises significant concerns, and it's not just about opportunism, it's also about manipulating younger individuals. It's about a deeply unsettling power imbalance. But this is only the prelude. Let's talk about when Max and Kelly officially got together. Let's pull back the curtain on the circumstances that solidified their relationship. Let's further complicate an already controversial timeline.